Thank you. Yeah, I too was slightly surprised to be described as sort of an alternate career path for PhDs. CRIs are actually major employers of PhDs. Like our Manaki Whenua alone's got over 300 science staff, and we're one of the smaller ones. So, yeah, so I hope to sort of interest you in what may be an alternative for you if those are looking outside of an academic career. So Crown Research Institutes is kind of set up as government companies, and our brief is actually to do public good research. So we're interested in outcomes, we're very applied focused, at least that's where our goals are, but within that there's actually a lot of scope for doing quite basic research, because all of these applied questions, you still have to understand the system. And so there is a need actually to sort of go right back and get that understanding. So we're funded in a mixture of sort of commercial and government funding. We get about 30% of our money from what's called Strategic Science Investment Fund, which is kind of bulk funding, if you like, for science, which comes from MB. And the remainder of that is stuff that we get from grants, just like people do at the university, or also from private companies as well. Now, I think CRIs are actually a great place to work. There's a lot of science expertise in these companies, like masses of it. So, I mean, some of these areas are very poorly represented in universities, such as systematics, for example, which are the folk who go out there and tell you, what sort of plant you have, what sort of invertebrate, fungi, all of those things are quite important for biosecurity. We've got over 40 staff who do that sort of work. The universities, I'm not sure what the numbers are, but they might be talking sort of 2 or 3. So there's big areas of research excellence kind of located within these organisations. And it's a long time since I was at university, but what I remember is it being quite a competitive environment, whereas we tend to work very collaboratively. So we tend to assemble sort of large teams to work on big problems. And we work really well with stakeholders. So because we're doing applied research, we involve our stakeholders right through at kind of the very early stage of our research to sort of understand what their needs are and help them sort of identify their problems and turn it into a scientific question that we can give them an answer for. And that's actually quite a rewarding process, sort of helping a layperson through from their perspective about what their issues through, and sort of bringing them on that scientific journey to try and understand, what's going on for something that's highly relevant to them. And in case some of you are thinking that, a Crown Research Institute might be a bit of an intellectual backwater, when you actually, one of our GMs kind of, gets all these citation things, and I'm not sure I quite believe it, but just to say that, in the top 5 institutions, CRIs are ranking in, 3 out of the top 5. So it's not an intellectual desert. There's lots of good stuff going on, lots of good science going on, and quite a lot of publishing. So the pathway to a CRI career, it's not actually that different from an academic career. And unfortunately, I sort of missed this sort of session this morning, and I think it would have been sort of quite illuminating, sort of as a counterpoint to the way we tend to work. But you can think of a CRI as being sort of a little bit like academia with a bit more end-user engagement, but without the first years. Like we are professional science staff. That's what we do. We do research all the time. And so if your bent is research rather than sort of teaching, then, this might be a good fit for you. So, but to get in there, it's those same issues that you struggle against in an academic career there, There's the sort of the postdoc pathway and, having strong publication records. For us, it's actually quite good to have kind of quite broad experience and adaptability, because we're working on a whole bunch of different problems. And so, you guys sort of coming out of your degrees and stuff, you'll be quite specialised and focused on the individual projects that you do, but you can't expect that the work that you do beyond there will be in any way related to what you're working on at the moment. You're getting skills to be able to apply the scientific method to problems. And that's sort of what we need, is people that have got sort of broad interests and are willing to adapt. And of course, with all these things, it helps if you've got a few quantitative skills, the sort of, I remember when I kind of first started out and I had this sort of research assistant job working with someone at the university, and I had to put some graphs together for them. And one of my jobs was that these were hand-drawn graphs, and she had typed out these kind of labels, and I had to cut these little labels out and stick them on the graphs, And that was how things were done back then. But, things have changed now, it's all high-tech, there's a lot of computer work, and all of that stuff really helps. So my own pathway, I sort of got lucky. I sort of came out of my PhD, and there was a 2-year postdoc advertised at Manaaki Whenua. And when I was sort of compiling this and sort of thinking about it, I realised that I was a bit of a mummy's boy, because I've actually worked at the same organisation for my entire career. So I started on this 2-year postdoc working on possums. My background is sort of animal-plant interactions. And then that ran out, and then I had another 6-month contract working on deer impacts on Secretary Island. And then from there, I got another 1-year contract. So this is the sort of stuff that, you guys will have to deal with when you're thinking about, your scientific career. Is that the reality is that it's a series of short-term contracts until you get that kind of big break that will allow you to establish yourself as a permanent career. And when that moment comes, it's great. But the uncertainty can be really hard to deal with. At the end of my 2-year postdoc, I had a family, I had a bit of land that, I was trying to emulate the 3 little pigs and building a house out of straw, sticks and bricks. And it would have done my head in if I'd thought sort of too hard about that, because you've got to get on with living, you've got to kind of commit, and yet you've got this sort of uncertainty about where you're going. But, you persevere, things happen, it all kind of hopefully works out in the end. So what do I do? Well, this kind of illustrates it quite well, is that you have to be adaptable to kind of work in a CRI, so there's no specialisation. I've worked on all sorts of things, invertebrates, rats, birds. I like designing very large experiments in the field that can be seen from space. I've worked on mass seeding, a little bit on lizards, lakeshore ecology, a whole bunch of things really. I trained as a plant ecologist, but actually I do quite a lot of animal stuff as well. But I also have quite strong quantitative skills, and so that has helped me get involved in lots of different things, but also means that you can survive through the tough times, because one of the issues with working in a CRI is that, and particularly the area that I'm interested in, is that funding is cyclical, and so there are good years, and for us it happens with a change in government, when they want to fund biodiversity research, and we go up and everything's great, and then there are those lean years, and you've got to sort of get through those, and it's the adaptability that will help you do that. So what does my work look like? Well, it sort of depends on what part of my career I was at. So in the early days, like what you guys are doing for your PhDs and postdocs and stuff, is you kind of do everything. You're writing papers, you're analysing data, you're gathering data and stuff, and just slogging your guts out. And then sort of as you get sort of further on, someone realises that you're not quite capable anymore of tying your own shoelaces, whether it's because I wore some of those kind of Velcro shoes or something, I don't know. But anyway, the technicians kind of shovel you more back towards the office, and you spend less time sort of actually with more of that hands-on things. Still writing papers, but you're doing a lot more planning, securing of funding, and also actually a hell of a lot more talking, like talking to stakeholders, talking to other people in the office, organising research, a lot of that kind of stuff, that background thinking and stuff to organise people and stuff. So I've been sort of looking at what that trajectory is, and sort of by the end I think I'm just going to be a talker really, There won't be much else for me to do. But I'm sort of hoping, in the afterlife, if some of the theorists are true, and I might actually get to meet the designer of the whole system, you'll have to look out for my series of papers saying, "I told you so." Of course, Newton and Darwin are going to be insufferable. So just to give you an idea of some of the things that's sort of involved, this sort of illustrates that point I was making before, that you might be dealing with an applied question, but actually the research that underpins it is quite fundamental. So many of you will have seen this, the whole beach seeding cycle, which generates rats, and which the stoats build up their numbers in response to that, and then when the seed runs out, everything turns to eating birds and whatnot. So I do quite a lot of work on the predicting the mass seeding. So the fundamental applied problem is that it's DOC want to know beforehand, with a sufficient advance to sort of arrange all their finances and all their staff and whatnot, when a big seedfall event's going to happen. And so that's, a practical problem and stuff, but underlying that is a whole pile of biology about plant reproduction, and how that varies across the landscape and stuff. And it's that sort of thing, which you can really get your kind of thrills about, a sort of more basic research, which has a very applied outcome. And another example, this sort of moves on from there. So one of the things we're quite good at is predicting what rats do in kind of cold forests, because it's quite a simple system. You get sort of, most of the time there's hardly any rats, and then you sort of get a big pulse of resources, the rats build up, and that's fine, we know how to do that. But in warm forests, you have a much more complicated system in that, there is resources there all the time, or at least there's a high level of resources and then pulses on top of that, and sort of predicting how that works is still a major unknown. And so we've just got a big program that's kind of looking at this stuff. And one of the things that's quite good about this is that it involves a whole pile of different sort of groups of people, and this is one of the things I really like about my job, is kind of the interaction with people from other agencies, but also, iwi, regional councils, central government, the whole lot, and it's really great. It's a really good thing about working in an applied setting within a CRI. Work-life balance. So I sort of heard that there's a few issues and stuff, that people see in academic careers about work-life balance, and it's always been really important for me. I like the outdoors. I had family sort of from a young age and stuff, and so trying to make that work within a CRI was really important to me. And by and large it does. I think as scientists we're kind of our own worst enemies, in that you see something, it looks interesting, you sort of poke around, it gets more interesting, and suddenly you've got another project, and you do that several times, and suddenly you're overworked. And this is, happens to me all the time, and, I know it's happening to me, but I can't stop myself, it's the way it is. It's not the CRI that's doing that to me, it's me. And I've got people on my case, at the moment who are trying to cut down my workload. But I don't think it's fundamentally something about CRIs, it's just our natural curiosity as a scientist. But that said, at the moment I'm 80% because I've got a young family and stuff, so, I have 2 half days a week in which I'm looking after them, and it works really well, My company's fine with me doing that, and there's many other people too who are on part-time contracts. So I think, I don't know about the academic world anymore, but I think that, within a CRI there is still plenty of scope, for kind of getting that balance between work and the rest of your life kind of about right, But again, it sort of depends on the personality. So in terms of advice that I might give you guys, when you're out there kind of looking for a career, I think you should be curious. Like as I said before, the options that present themselves to you guys are probably not going to be the ones that you actually, considered when you were studying. So sort of poke around, be interested in other stuff, and just be open to the possibility that your career path is going to be quite different from, the academic world that you've kind of enmeshed yourself in. I remember when I finished my PhD, feeling quite institutionalized. You've done this kind of, you've done your honours degree or whatever it was, your master's, and then you've done your PhD, and suddenly, half your life has gone before you, and you're still there, So sort of breaking out of that and considering other opportunities, which, some of our speakers have already mentioned, I think is a really great thing. The other thing is just to persevere. You're going to get a lot of knockbacks, and also a lot of these short-term contracts. And, you know, if I was advising a small child, you know, about whether to go into science or not, I would say, don't bother unless you love it. You know, if you really love this stuff, it's worth the grief that it takes to kind of get to where you want to go. So just stick with it. You know, you will get knockbacks, but just stick with it because it's a bloody awesome job. The other thing I'd say is just have integrity. You know, don't compromise who you are, what you stand for. You know, particularly if you're moving into a space where, I mean, for us, you know, one of the issues that we perennially have is that we work for commercial entities and they might want us to give a certain message, you know, that would help their cause, but actually, you know, we're scientists first and foremost and we stick to what the data says, you know, just have integrity. And I guess my last point is just enjoy the ride, eh? You know, it's lots of fun and, you know, it'll be tough, but there's great rewards at the end. Thank you.